maybe this was a mistake. Heh, they'd laugh if they knew. A billionaire sitting in dust, looking for something money can't buy. I just wanted someone to see me. Not the name, not the cars, not the suits, but this is real. Dust, sweat, silence, hunger. I didn't expect it to feel this lonely.
In a small, dusty village, he was just a poor taxi driver, laughed at, mocked, rejected. But deep beneath the torn clothes was a secret so big it could change her life forever. Not everyone who looks broken is truly poor, and not every love story begins with a crown. The sun was hot. In the small village of Owena, people walked slowly, fanning themselves with old newspapers. Chickens ran around freely, and the smell of roasted corn filled the air. In the middle of all this, a young woman named Ife was sweeping the front of her mother's small food stall. Her clothes were clean, but old. She smiled at everyone who passed, even when her belly made small noises from hunger.
Ife, go and buy more onions from Mama BC.
Her mother called from inside the smoky kitchen.
Yes, Mama.
Ife replied quickly, dropping the broom. She walked with light feet, her braided hair bouncing. Everyone in the village liked her. She helped the old people carry their baskets and gave free food to hungry children when her mother was not looking. But what no one knew was that Ife had big dreams. She wanted to go to the city. She wanted to own her own restaurant. She wanted to make enough money so her mother would never work again. Far away, in the big city of Lekki, a man named Toby sat in a tall glass building. He wore a suit that cost more than most people made in a year. He was rich, very rich. He owned hotels, farms, and even a fashion company. But today, he was not happy. He looked out of the window at the busy cars and sighed.
All this power, and yet I'm still invisible. Maybe it's time they saw me without the suits. They only like me because I have money.
He said to his friend Dayo, who sat across from him. Dayo laughed.
Of course, you're rich and handsome. What do you expect?
I want someone to love me for who I am, not for what I have.
Toby said, rubbing his short beard. That night, Toby had a strange dream. In the dream, he was poor. He wore torn clothes and drove a dusty, old taxi. But in that dream, he met a girl with kind eyes who gave him water without asking for anything. When he woke up, his heart was beating fast. The next day, Toby did something crazy. He wore simple clothes, took some money, and told his driver to take him far, very far.
Where to, sir?
Drive until we see no more tall buildings.
Toby said, with a smile. After many hours, they reached a village. The roads were rough, and goats walked in the middle of the street. Toby smiled.
This is perfect.
He whispered. He paid the driver and stepped out with a small bag. Nobody knew who he was. He found a place to sleep and bought an old yellow taxi from a man who thought Toby was just another broke young man from the city. Toby started driving around, picking up passengers. He was clumsy at first. He didn't know how to greet elders or how to drive on the muddy roads. But he learned fast. He watched people. He smiled a lot. And soon, everyone started calling him Brother Toby. One hot afternoon, as he waited by the market square, a girl knocked on his window.
Please, can you take me to the river?
She asked, her voice soft and her eyes bright. Toby looked up and saw her. It was Ife.
Yes, come in.
He said, his voice shaky. As she sat, their eyes met in the mirror. In that short moment, something happened, like magic, like a drum beating slowly in the heart. But Ife didn't know that the driver was a billionaire. And Toby didn't know that this girl was going to change his life forever. Toby tried to keep his eyes on the road, but he kept looking at Ife through the mirror. Her skin glowed like smooth cocoa under the sun. She wore a simple pink dress, her braided ponytail resting neatly behind her. She smelled like palm oil and fresh soap sweet. Honest, real. Eve looked out the window. The wind brushed softly against her cheek. Her fingers gently tapped the seat, following a rhythm in her head.
You're new here.
How do you know?
She smiled, without looking at him.
You drive like a city man, too fast for these roads.
Toby laughed nervously.
I'm still learning.
You'll get used to it. Owena is small but it has a big heart.
At the river, Ife climbed out and handed him a few crumpled notes. Toby stared at the money, unsure whether to take it.
I don't have change.
That's okay. Keep it.
With a smile. And just like that, she walked away, her bare feet kicking up little clouds of dust. That night, Toby couldn't sleep. He sat on the small mattress in his tiny rented room, thinking about the girl with kind eyes. He wasn't used to this feeling. Women in the city chased his cars, his wallet, his name. But Ife didn't even ask for his name. The next morning, he washed his taxi early. He wanted it to shine, even though the paint was peeling. He combed his hair, wore his cleanest shirt, and waited by the market square. He didn't have to wait long. Ife came walking with a basket of onions balanced on her head. She looked surprised to see him again.
You again.
Maybe this road likes me.
Or maybe you like the girl who walks it.
Let me take you where you're going. Free ride.
I don't take free things from strangers.
Then maybe we shouldn't be strangers.
She giggled. He answered, heart racing. Ife tilted her head, pretending to think. Then she smiled and got in. That ride changed everything. Every day after that, Toby waited for Ife. He learned about her mother's food stall, how she dreamed of a restaurant with white plates and real napkins. He watched her laugh with children, bargain with market women, and wash her hands carefully before eating. She talked about her dreams like they were already real. She made simple things feel magical. But Toby was hiding a big truth, and each time he looked at her, the secret sat heavier on his chest. One evening, they sat under a mango tree, sharing boiled groundnuts. The sun painted the sky, orange and pink. "I feel like I've known you forever," Ife said softly. "Maybe you have," Toby replied. She looked at him, puzzled. "What do you mean?" He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Nothing. Just thinking aloud. Before she could ask more, a voice shouted from behind, "Ife, your mother needs you." She stood up quickly. "I have to go."
Will I see you tomorrow?
It all depends. If you're not too busy driving like a city man again.
And then she was gone. Toby sat under the tree, peeling groundnuts slowly. His heart was full and heavy at the same time. He wanted to tell her the truth. But what if she hated him for lying? What if she walked away? What if she was the one and he ruined it? He closed his eyes and whispered to the evening wind,
Please, don't let me lose her.
The next morning came with soft rain. The village of Owena smelled like wet earth and firewood. Little streams danced beside the road, and the trees looked greener than ever. Toby sat inside his taxi, watching raindrops slide down the windshield. His heart was not calm. He kept thinking of Ife, her laughter, the way she walked, how she said his name. He had lied to her by hiding who he really was, and each time she trusted him, the lie grew bigger. But still, he waited. He waited in the rain until the clouds broke open and the sun peeped through. Around midday, he saw her. She was walking toward him with her basket wrapped in a nylon cover. She looked surprised to see him waiting in the same spot. "You again?" she asked with a playful smile. "Maybe I like rainy days," he said, standing quickly to open the door. She got in and wiped the rain from her face with a small cloth. "You should be careful, Brother Toby," she said. "Some girls might fall for a driver who waits in the rain." "Maybe that's what I want," he replied, before thinking. She paused and looked at him. "You joke a lot," she said. But her cheeks turned pink. They drove in silence for a while. The road was muddy, and goats danced in the middle of it, like they owned the place. Toby slowed down and laughed. "Even the goats here have confidence." Ife chuckled. "You'll fit in well then." They reached a small market, and Ife stepped out with her basket. Toby called after her, "Wait." She turned around, slowly. "Will you go somewhere with me?" he asked. "Just to talk, by the river?" Ife studied his face. The breeze played with her scarf. For a moment, she didn't speak. Then she nodded. After market, Toby felt like he could float. That evening, they sat by the riverbank. Their feet dipped in the cool water. The sky above them turned soft purple, and the trees whispered secrets in the wind.
Do you ever want to leave Owena?
Every single day, but my mother, she needs me. She's worked too hard, her hands are always swollen. I promised myself I'd make her proud. I want more, a restaurant, maybe even a hotel. Heh, big dreams, I know.
They're not too big. In fact, they're just right.
What about you? What do you want?
I want someone to see me. Really see me. Not my job, not my clothes. Just me.
That's what I want too.
They sat in silence, letting the sounds of frogs and flowing water speak for them. Suddenly, Toby's phone rang. He quickly pulled it out and silenced it, but not fast enough. Ife saw the screen flash. It said, "Dio, CEO, Obiko Holdings." Her eyes narrowed. "Obiko Holdings?" she asked slowly. "Is that your friend?" Toby froze. His hand shook slightly as he slipped the phone back into his pocket. "Yes, just a friend." Ife looked at him strangely, but she didn't say anything more. That night, she couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the name, Obiko Holdings. She had seen it before, on the news, on a billboard. Once, when she followed her mother to the city. Was Brother Toby lying? And if so, why? The next day, Ife was quieter than usual. She walked slowly to the market, her mind full of questions. The name Obiko Holdings echoed in her head like a drumbeat. She remembered the shining billboard, the suit-wearing men, the fancy cars. What if Toby was not who he said he was? When she reached the square, Toby was already waiting, leaning against his dusty taxi. He wore his usual simple shirt, but something about him looked different now. More careful, more nervous. "Good morning," he said, opening the door. "Morning," she replied softly. They drove in silence for a while. The road was the same. The goats were still bold, the wind still warm, but the air between them was not the same. "You're not talking today," Toby said, trying to smile. "Just thinking," Ife answered. "About what?" "About people, about truth." Toby looked ahead, gripping the steering wheel tighter. "Ife," he said, his voice serious, "can I ask you something?" She turned to him. "Would you be angry if someone close to you kept a big secret?" She didn't answer right away. Then she said, "I guess it depends. Are they hiding to protect themselves or to protect me?" Toby swallowed hard. He wanted to pull the car over. He wanted to tell her everything, but fear held his tongue. She looked out the window again. "Secrets are like smoke," she said. "They rise, and one day they make it hard to breathe." They reached the market. She stepped out, adjusted her scarf, and gave him a small nod. "I'll walk today." Toby didn't move. He just watched her go, his chest heavy. That night, Toby drove out of the village and found a quiet place. Under a tall mango tree, he leaned back in his seat and stared at the stars. "I can't keep this up," he whispered to the sky. "She's not like the others. She's real. She's everything." His phone buzzed again. This time, it was a video call. Dio's face filled the screen.
Bro, you've gone mad. You've been in that village for 2 weeks. The board is getting nervous.
I need more time.
You're falling for her, aren't you? Haha, just tell her, man. She's either going to run or stay. But you can't play poor forever.
Toby ended the call and closed his eyes. The next morning, he made up his mind. He would tell her the truth. He dressed neatly, still in his village clothes, and drove to her mother's food stall. The smell of pepper soup filled the air. Children ran past him, laughing, their joy untouched by the storm in his chest. Ife was behind the store, washing bowls. When she saw him, her hands froze. "Can we talk?" he asked gently. She dried her hands and stepped out. They walked down a quiet path beneath the shade of banana trees. Birds chirped high above, like they were whispering the truth ahead of him. Ife, he began, his heart thudding like a drum. I haven't been fully honest with you. She raised an eyebrow, but said nothing.
My name is Toby Adekunle. I'm not just a taxi driver. I own Obiko Holdings. I came here to escape for a while, to find something real.
You lied to me.
I didn't mean to. I wanted you to see me. Not the money, not the name, just me.
Her chest tightened. Her eyes searched his, not for his wealth, but for her own worth.
You should go.
Ife.
You should go now, Toby, before I cry in front of you.
And just like that, the boy who wore torn clothes and carried golden secrets stood alone. In Owina, trust was gold, pure, rare, and hard to win back. Meanwhile, Ife didn't sleep that night. She lay on the mat beside her mother, eyes open, staring at the ceiling. Her chest felt heavy, her mind spinning. She had opened her heart, slowly, like peeling yam skin, carefully, gently. She had told him about her dreams, her fears, her hunger, and he had looked at her like she was enough, like she mattered. But it was all a lie. He was a billionaire playing dress up, and she was the village fool who thought love came in a dusty yellow taxi. The next morning, she tied her scarf a little tighter and walked to the market with her head low. People greeted her, but her smile was missing. Then she saw it. The taxi parked quietly by the side of the road, but it was empty. Good. She didn't want to see him. Not today. Not ever. Maybe. But her heart had other ideas. Every time she saw a blue shirt, she thought of him. Every time someone laughed, softly, she heard his smile in it. And worst of all, each time the wind brushed her face, she remembered the moment. He gently tucked a stray braid behind her ear, without asking. 3 days passed, then 4, then 7. No sign of Toby. But one evening, just before sunset, a big black car rolled into the village square. It wasn't dusty, it wasn't slow. It gleamed like a mirror and stretched long, like a sleeping snake. People came out to see. Children ran behind it, shouting and laughing. Even the goats moved out of its way. The car stopped in front of the food stall. The door opened and Toby stepped out, wearing a clean white kaftan and brown leather sandals. His beard was neatly trimmed, his face tired but calm. Ife was carrying a tray of soup plates. When she saw him, she froze. He walked slowly toward her, not proud, not loud, just quiet. I came to say goodbye, he said. She didn't speak.
I left because I didn't want to confuse you. I didn't want to make things harder. But I couldn't leave without saying thank you.
For what? She asked coldly.
For showing me how it feels to be seen. For making me laugh without reason. For reminding me what real life feels like.
Tears formed in her eyes, but she blinked fast to hide them. You tricked me, she said. You sat and listened to me talk about struggle, while your wallet could fix everything in my life.
I know, and I'm sorry.
She looked at him, her voice low. You made me believe you were just like me. I wanted to be, he whispered. Then he reached into his pocket and pulled out a small notebook. It was old with torn edges.
I wrote down every dream you told me, every recipe, every idea. If you still want that restaurant, I'd like to help. No strings attached.
He held it out to her, but Ife didn't take it. She turned and walked inside. Toby stood there, a long moment. Then he nodded. Slowly, he placed the notebook on a wooden bench, climbed into the car, and drove away. That night, Ife sat under the stars. The village was quiet, the wind soft. She opened the notebook. Page 1, Ife's place, a restaurant that feels like home. Page 2, a drawing of a small kitchen. Yellow walls, wooden tables. She flipped through the pages. Her ideas, her words, her dreams, written in his handwriting. And that's when she cried. Not because he was rich, not because he lied, but because he remembered everything. The next morning, I've carried the notebook everywhere. She didn't tell her mother. She didn't tell her friends. She just held it close, like a secret only the wind should know. Each night, she opened it again. Toby had written details. Only someone who truly listened could remember. How she wanted the smell of fried plantain at the door. How she dreamed of putting her mother's name on the signboard. How no child would ever be turned away hungry. Every line felt like a hand reaching out from far away. And each time she read it, the anger inside her melted a little more. But pride was strong too. She had trusted before, and it had burned her. She wasn't ready to open that door again. 2 weeks passed. One hot afternoon, a stranger came to the stall. A woman in a grey dress, wearing glasses and holding a clipboard. Her voice was calm, steady. Is this the food stall owned by Madame Aduni and her daughter Ife? Yes, Ife replied, wiping her hands. My name is Ngozi. I work with the Obiko Foundation. We're looking for strong women with big ideas. You've been nominated for a grant. Ife blinked. A grant? Yes, the woman nodded. For your restaurant idea. We received a notebook filled with your plans, your designs. It was very impressive. Ife's hands trembled slightly. Who sent it? I'm not allowed to say, but the name on the front cover was Ife's place, and we believe you're the right person to bring it to life. Ngozi handed her a folder. Its pages were bright, full of color, logos, sketches, a business plan, and right there, a photo of a small building with a wooden door and a sign above it, Ife's place, home in every bite. I've stared at the folder like it was magic, like a dream she never dared to say out loud. Her mother stepped outside, sweat on her brow and a towel in hand. Who is this woman? She asked. Ife's voice trembled. Mama, we might have a restaurant. For days, the village buzzed. People came with questions. Children danced around her singing, Auntie Ife is opening a big shop. But deep inside, something else stirred. A quiet ache. A question with no answer. Where was Toby? Why hadn't he come back? Then, one morning, a little boy ran into the stall, holding a white envelope. "This is for Auntie Ife," he said, grinning. She opened it. Inside was a letter. "Dear Ife, I didn't expect you to forgive me, but I hope you would follow your dreams, even if I couldn't be part of them. You once said that your food could heal the heart. You were right. You healed mine. I'm going back to the city now. There's a lot to fix. But if you ever want to talk, I'll be at the rooftop cafe at Obiko Hotel every Sunday at noon. I'll keep a seat open, just in case. Always, Toby." Eve folded the letter slowly, holding it to her chest. She looked out at the sky. The clouds were white and full. The wind smelled like rain and fried akara. She didn't know what she would do yet, but her heart was no longer silent. And somewhere in the city, a man waited, quiet, hopeful, and still in love. Days turned into weeks. The building for Ife's place had begun. A small plot near the village square was cleared. Workers hammered wood and mixed cement. Curious neighbors peeked through the fence every day, whispering, "Can you believe it? Little Ife is building a restaurant." Ife walked past it daily, her hands tucked behind her back, her heart full and unsure. She answered politely, smiled kindly, but something inside her still waited, like a drum that hadn't been touched. She often took out the letter, sat under the mango tree, and read it like a sacred prayer. Each fold felt like a heartbeat, each word like a whisper. That night, as they ate boiled yam and egusi soup, Mama Aduni watched her closely. "You still think about him," she said softly. Ife didn't reply. Her mother gently placed her spoon down. "You're building your dream, Ife, but dreams are sweeter when your heart is not heavy." Ife looked up, eyes filled with quiet storms. "He lied, Mama." Her mother nodded. "He did, but he also listened. He remembered, and he gave, not to buy you, but to build you." Silence filled the small room. Then Mama reached out and held her daughter's hand. "Don't let your pain become your prison, my child. Freedom sometimes means giving love another chance." That night, Ife didn't sleep. The next morning, she bathed before the sun rose, tied her hair into a neat bun, wore a yellow dress, and placed the letter carefully inside her bag. She didn't tell anyone where she was going. She boarded a crowded village bus, heading for Lekki. The journey was long, the road rough, but she didn't care. She arrived in the city just before noon, the streets alive with traffic and voices. Glass buildings rose high into the sky, like trees made of silver. She had never seen so many people walking so fast. But she had only one destination, Obiko Hotel. She stepped into the grand lobby, marble floors, crystal lights, air that smelled like roses, and cold money. The staff glanced her way, surprised, but she didn't stop. She moved toward the elevator, steady, calm. The rooftop cafe was quiet. The wind, soft, round white tables, flowers blooming at the edges. And there he was, Toby, sitting near the glass railing, navy shirt, a small book in his hand, the seat beside him, empty. She walked toward him. He looked up slowly. Their eyes met. And for a moment, the whole world stopped breathing. "Ife," he whispered. She stood still. I almost didn't come. He rose to his feet. I almost stopped waiting. They looked at each other like people who had walked through fire and found water. She stepped closer. You hurt me. I know. You made me feel small. I'm sorry. But, she paused, breathing deeply. You also saw me when no one else did. A breeze moved between them, soft and warm. And I missed you, she finished. Toby's eyes glistened. I missed you every single day. He reached out his hand. She took it. They sat, talked, laughed, cried. And for the first time in a long time, they didn't hide anything. When she left that evening, Toby walked her to the bus station. I'm not staying in the city, she said softly. My life is in Owena. My heart is there. I know, he smiled. And so is mine. Now, back in the village, the building was finished. The signboard, freshly painted, in gold and deep brown. It read, Ife's place, home in every bite. And one sunny afternoon, when the doors opened for the very first time, the village gathered. Laughter, music, and the rich, welcoming smell of jollof rice filled the air. Toby stood quietly in the back, wearing his dusty driver's shirt again. Familiar, grounded. Beside him, I've leaned gently against his shoulder. They had no script, no perfect plan, just two hearts that found each other in a place where truth grew slowly, like yam in the rainy season. You've just experienced a tale from African Tales by Nina, where stories reign and values endure. If this story touched your heart, leave a comment, subscribe, and share it with someone who still believes in love. Until next time, walk with purpose and carry our stories with pride.